From our side, and even the underwriter side, I mean, when we look at submissions for healthcare, for cyber insurance for healthcare, the risk manager comes back, if it is a risk manager, and says, I wear so many hats. I'm not just the risk manager. I'm the facilities manager. I'm this. I do contracts. I'm pulled in so many different directions, and now you're asking me to be on top of it when I have a breach. Many healthcare organizations don't have an incident response plan, but who's in charge of making that incident response plan? The risk manager, who wears 10 different hats. So sometimes when we see these submissions come in, and they're not stellar, it's because the feedback we get from our clients is we can't do it all. So what is your recommendation on maybe the number one thing that they, as a risk manager, should
let me say
on?
this. One thing that healthcare organizations do really well is they know how to respond to emergencies. If you think about it, that's what codes are. That's what, when they're doing disaster preparedness, and they're required to do all of this. And they have a lot of that infrastructure already in place. And I know when we counsel with healthcare organizations, we talk about using some of the things that they already have in place. You have an incident response team. You may not have an incident response team that quite looks like a breach incident response team, but you have you've got your PR, you've got your public information officer, all of these things that are part of your emergency management plan that you can pull into and use those types of things. I'm sure the other panelists have some other comments on that, but that is one thing that we try to do is say, what do you guys already have in place that we can then layer over into a breach response plan so that you're operating in more familiar territory than you think that you should be, than you think you are in when you have a breach. One thing healthcare organizations they are very consensus driven. There's a CEO who obviously does a lot at the top, but there's a lot of lieutenants who do a lot of things on that next layer. And who's in charge of a breach response? You would think it's going to be the compliance officer or a privacy officer, and those people don't necessarily sit in the C-suite, even though they have those titles. I mean, they sit in the C-suite, but they may not really know the details around what they should be doing in the case of a data breach in a healthcare organization. So we do find a lot of consensus in attempting to determine what's the right steps to take, knowing that there's going to be a media notification. I think healthcare organizations are in a unique position in a lot of communities because they're so trusted by their patients. In many places, you have options of where you can go, and they're very concerned about losing their patients to another institution who maybe didn't have to go to the press. And so what we have found in breaches involving over 500, that magic number of 500 in that particular jurisdiction, which I can only imagine is just punishment to organizations, because even if you know all 500 persons' address, and you know that they're going to get the breach notification, you still have to go to the media on it. And it is devastating in working with those healthcare organizations when they realize that this is going to be public, and they're going to have to essentially show their dirty laundry.